Hey guys, we are going to start in with Stargirl again today, and hopefully my phone will focus by the time I open this book. Alright, we're on chapter 5, page 22 today. Can you see this? Can you see this? Okay. Hold on. Is that all good? Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure it's lined up in the camera. Okay, here we go. Chapter 5, page 22. The call came from Kevin on a Friday night. He was at the football game. Quick, hurry, drop whatever you're doing, now. Kevin was one of few who went to the games. The school kept threatening to drop football because of low attendance. They said ticket receipts were barely enough to pay for the electricity to light the field. But Kevin was screaming on the phone. I jumped in the family pickup, which is a truck, and raced to the stadium. I bolted from the truck. Kevin was at the gate, windmilling his arms. Hurry! I threw the $2 admission at the ticket window, and we raced for the field. See better up here, he said, yanking me into the stands. It was halftime, and the band was on the field, all 14 of them. Among the students, it was known that the world's smallest standing band. There weren't enough of them to form recognizable letters or shapes except for a capital I, so they didn't march much at halftime of games. They mostly just stood, in 2 rows of 7 each, plus the student conductor. No majorettes, no color guard, no flag, and rifle girls. Except this night, Stargirl Caraway was on the field with them. As they played, rooted in their places, she pranced around on the grass in her bare feet and long lemon yellow dress. Woo, look at them tongue twisters. She roamed for the goalpost from goalpost, and she swirled like a dust devil. She marched stiffly like a wooden soldier, and she tooted an imaginary flute. She pogoed into... Can we still see it? Pogoed into the air and knocked her bare heels together. The cheerleaders gaped from the sidelines. A few people in the stands whistled, and the rest, they barely outnumbered the band, sat there with the "what is this" on their faces. The band stopped playing and marched off the field. Stargirl stayed. She was twirling down the 40-yard line when the players returned. They did a minute of warm-up exercises, and she joined in. Jumping jacks, belly whomps. The teams lined up for the second half kickoff, and the ball perched on the kicking tee. She was still on the field. The referee blew his whistle and pointed to her. He flapped his hand for her to go away. Instead, she dashed for the ball. She plucked it off the tee and danced with it, spinning and hugging it, hoisting it up into the air. The players looked at their coaches, and the coaches looked at the officials. The officials blew their whistles and began converging on her, chasing her. The sole policeman on duty headed for the field. She punted the ball, kicked the ball, over the visiting team's bench and ran from the field and out of the stadium. Everyone cheered. The spectators, the cheerleaders, the band, the players, the officials, the parents running the hot dog stand, the policeman, me. We whistled and stomped our feet on the aluminum bleachers. The cheerleaders stared up in delighted surprise. For the first time, they were hearing something come back from the stands. They did cartwheels and backflips and even a 3-tiered pyramid, old-timers, or as old-as-timers got in the city of young Micah, said they had never heard such a racket. Guys, I'm going to pause real quick and get some more light. There we go. Can we still see? Okay, there we go. Sorry, back at it. Page 24. For the next home game, more than 1,000 people showed up. Everyone but Wayne Parr and Hillary Kimball. There was a line at the ticket window. The refreshment stand ran out of hot dogs, and a second policeman was called in. The cheerleaders were in their glory, and they screamed up at the bleachers, "Give me an E!" The bleachers screamed back, "E!" We were the Electrons in honor of the town's electronics heritage. The cheerleaders ran through all their routines before the first quarter was over. The band was loud and peppy, and the football team even scored a touchdown. In the stands, heads kept swinging to the edge of the field, to the entrance, to the street lamp-lighted darkness behind the stadium. The sense of expectation grew as the first half came to a close. The band marched smartly onto the field, even though they were looking around. The musicians did their program. They even formed a small, lopsided circle. They seemed to linger on the field, drawing out their notes, waiting. Finally, reluctantly, they marched to the sideline. The players returned, and they kept glancing around as they did their warm-ups. When the referee raised his arms and blew his whistle for the second half to begin, a sense of disappointment fell over the stadium. The cheerleader's shoulders sagged. She wasn't coming. On the following Monday, we got a shock in the lunchroom. Bleached, blonde, and beautiful Mallory Stillwell, captain of the cheerleaders, was sitting with Stargirl. She sat with her and ate with her and talked with her and walked with her. By sixth period, the whole school knew. Stargirl had been invited to become a cheerleader and had said yes. People in Phoenix might have heard us buzzing. Phoenix is like the next biggest city close to this one. Would she wear the usual skirt and sweater like everyone else? Would she do the usual cheers? Did all the cheerleaders want this, or was it just the captain's idea? Were they jealous? Cheerleading practice drew a crowd. At least 100 of us stood by the parking lot that day, watching her learn the cheers, watching her jump around in her long pioneer dress. She spent 2 weeks practicing, and halfway through the second week she wore her uniform, green-trimmed white V-neck cotton sweater, and a short green and white pleated skirt. She looked just like the rest of them. Still, to us, she was not truly a cheerleader, but Stargirl dressed like one. She continued to strum her ukulele and sing happy birthday to people, and she still wore long skirts with non-game days and made a home of her school desks. When Halloween arrived, everyone in her homeroom found a candy pumpkin on his or her desk, and no one had to ask who did it. By then, most of us had decided that we liked having her around, and we found ourselves looking forward to coming to school to see what bizarre antics she would be up to. She gave us something to talk about. She was entertaining. At the same time, we held back, because she was different. Different. We had no one to compare her to, no one to measure her against. She was unknown territory, unsafe. We were afraid to get too close. Also, I think we were all waiting to see the outcome of an event that loomed larger and larger with every passing day. The next birthday coming up was Hillary Kimball's. Ooh, how do you think that birthday's going to go? Because how does Hillary feel about Stargirl? Okay, that should be a little brighter. Chapter 6, page 27. Hillary herself sat on the stage the day before. Set the stage the day before. In the middle of lunch, she got up from her table and walked over to Stargirl. For half a minute, she just stood behind Stargirl's chair. Silence everywhere except for her tinklings in the kitchen. Only Stargirl was still chewing. Hillary moved around to the side. "I'm Hillary Kimball," she said. Stargirl looked up. She smiled and she said, "I know." "My birthday is tomorrow." "I know." Hillary paused. Her eyes narrowed. She jabbed her finger into Stargirl's face. "Don't try singing to me. I'm warning you." Only those at nearby tables heard Stargirl faintly reply, "I won't sing to you." Hillary gave a satisfied smirk and walked off. From the moment we arrived at school the next day, the atmosphere bristled like cactus petals. When the buzzer sounded for the first lunch, we leapt for the doors. We swarmed into the food lines. We raced through our choices and hurried into our seats. Never had we moved so fast, so quickly. At most, we whispered. We sat and we ate. We were afraid to crunch our potato chips, afraid we might miss something. Hillary was first to enter. She marched in, leading her girlfriends like an invading general. In the food line, she smacked items onto her tray, and she glared at the cashier. There we go. While her friends scanned the crowd for Stargirl, Hillary stared ferociously at her sandwich. We're on page 28. Wayne Parr came in and sat several tables away, as if even he was afraid of her on this day. Stargirl finally came in, and she went straight to the food line, blithely smiling as usual. Blithely means just like happily da-da-da. Both she and Hillary seemed unaware of each other. Stargirl ate. Hillary ate. We watched. Only the clock moved. A kitchen staffer stuck her head over the conveyor belt and called, "Trays!" And a voice barked back, "Shut up!" Stargirl finished her lunch. As usual, she stuffed her wrappings into her paper bag, carried the bag to the paper-only can by the tray return window, and dropped it in. She returned to her seat, she picked up the ukulele, and we stopped breathing. Hillary stared at her sandwich. Stargirl began strumming and humming. She stood. She strolled between the tables, humming and strumming. 300 pairs of eyes followed her. She came to Hillary Kimball's table and kept on walking. Right up to the table where Kevin and I were with the hot seat crew. She stopped and sang, "Happy Birthday." It was Hillary's name at the end of the song, but true to her word the day before, she did not sing it to Hillary. She sang it to me. She stood at my shoulder and looked down at me, smiling and singing, and I didn't know whether to look down at my hands or up at her face. I did some of each. My face was burning. When she finished, the students burst from their silence with wild applause. Hillary Kimball stomped from the lunchroom. Kevin looked up at Stargirl and pointed at me and said everyone must have been thinking, "Why him?" Stargirl tilted her head as if studying me. She grinned, mischievously. She tugged on my earlobe and said, "He's cute," and walked off. I was feeling 9 ways at once, and then all kind of ended up at the touch of her hand on my ear, until Kevin reached over and yanked the same earlobe. This keeps getting more interesting," he said. "I think it's time to go see Archie." Oh la la, we have romance in this book too. All right, chapter 7, page 30. This will be our last chapter today. Page 30. A.H. Archibald Harpwood Burbacker lived in a house of bones. Jaw bones, hip bones, femurs. There were bones in every room, every closet, on the back porch. Some people have stone cats on their roofs, and on his roof, Archie Brubacher had a skeleton of Monroe, his deceased Siamese, which is a type of cat. He has his cat skeleton on the roof. Take a seat in his bathroom, and you'll find yourself facing the faintly smirking skull of Doris, a prehistoric creodont, which is an old animal. Open the kitchen cabinet where the peanut butter was kept, and you were face to face with a fossil face, with the extinct fox. Archie was not morbid, meaning he liked death. He was a paleontologist. A paleontologist is a scientist that studies old bones in the ground. The bones were from digs he had done throughout the American West. Many were rightly his, found in his spare time, and others he collected from museums, but slipped it into his own pocket or knapsack instead. "Better to sit it in my refrigerator than disappear in a drawer in some museum basement," he said. When he wasn't digging up old bones, Archie Brubacher was teaching at university in the East. He retired at the age of 65, and when he was 66, his wife, Ada Mae, died. At 67, he moved himself and his bones west to join the other fossils. He chose his home for 2 reasons. 1, its proximity to the high school. He wanted to be near kids. He had none of his own. And 2, Senor Saguaro. Senor Saguaro was a cactus, a 30-foot tall giant that towered over the tool shed in the backyard. It had 2 arms high on the trunk. One stuck straight out, and the other made a right turn upward, as if waving adios, which is goodbye in Spanish. The waving arm was green from the elbow up. All else was brown, dead. Much of the thick, leathery skin along the trunk had come loose and crumpled in a heap about the massive foot. Senor Saguaro had lost his pants. Only his ribs, thumb-thick vertical timbers held him up, and elf owls nested in his chest. Senor Saguaro is not a person, it's a plant. It's a giant cactus. They're talking about him like he's a person. Anyway, we're still on page 31. The old professor often talked to Senor Saguaro, and to us. He was not certified to teach in Arizona, but that did not stop him. Every Saturday morning, his house became a school. 4th graders, 12th graders, all were welcome. No tests, no grades, no attendance record. Just the best school most of us had ever gone to. He covered everything from toothpaste to tapeworms, and somehow made it all fit together. He called us the Loyal Order of the Stone Bone. He gave us homemade necklaces. The pendant was a small fossil bone strung on rawhide. Years before, he had told his first class, "Call me Archie." He had never had to say it again. After dinner that day, Kevin and I walked over to Archie's. Though the official class convened on Saturday morning, kids were welcome any time. "My school," he said, "is everywhere and always in session." We found him, as usual, on the back porch, rocking and reading. The porch, bathed in the red gold light of sunset, faced the Maricopas, which are the mountains. Archie's white hair seemed to give off its own light. The moment he saw us, he put down his book. "Students, welcome!" Page 32. "Archie," we said, and then, to greet the great cactus as visitors we were expected to do, "Senor Saguaro," we saluted. Is this still in the picture? We sat on the rockers, and the porch was full of them. "So, men," he said, "business or pleasure?" "Bafflement," right? "Confusion," I said. "There's a new girl at school." He laughed. "Stargirl." Kevin's eyes popped. "You know her?" "Know her?" he said. He picked up his pipe and loaded it with cherry sweet tobacco. He always did this when settling in for long lecture or conversation. "Good question." He lit the pipe. "Let's say she's been on the porch here quite a few times." White smoke puffed like an Apache signals from the corner of his mouth. "I was wondering when you'd start asking questions," he chuckled to himself. "Bafflement. Good word. She is different, isn't she?" Kevin and I burst into laughter and nods. At that moment, I realized how much I had been craving Archie's confirmation. Kevin exclaimed, "Like another species." Archie cocked his head as if he had just caught the sound of a rare bird. The pipe stem anchored a wry grin. I lost my place. A sweet scent filled the air about our rocking chairs. He stared at Kevin. "On the contrary, she's one of us. Most decidedly. She is us more than we are us. She is, I think, who we really are, or were." Archie talked that way sometimes, in riddles. We didn't always know what he was saying, but our ears didn't much care. We just wanted to hear more. 33. As the sun dipped below the mountains, it fired a final dart at Archie's flashing eyebrows. "She's homeschooled, you know. Her mother brought her to me. I guess she wanted a break from playing teacher. 1 day a week, 4 or 5 years. Yes, 5 years now." Kevin pointed. "You created her." Archie smiled and puffed. "No, that was done long before me. Some people are saying she's some kind of alien sent down here from Alpha Centauri or something," said Kevin. He chuckled, but not too convincingly. He half believed it. Archie's pipe had gone out, and he relit it. "She's anything but. She's an earthling if there ever was one." "So it's not just an act?" said Kevin. "An act? No. If anybody's acting, it's us. She was real as—" He looked around, and he picked up a tiny wedge-like skull of a Barney. A 60-million-year-old Paleocene rodent. Like a really, 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 really old rat. And he held it up. "As real as Barney." I felt a little jolt of pride as having reached this conclusion myself. "But the name," said Kevin, leaning forward. "Is it real?" "The name?" Archie shrugged. "Every name is real. That's the nature of names. When she first showed up, she called herself Pocket Mouse, then Mud Pie, then, Hully Gully, I believe. Now, Stargirl." The world came out whispery, and my throat was dry. Archie looked at me. "Whatever strikes her fancy, maybe." 34. "That's how names ought to be, eh? Why be stuck with just one your whole life?" "What about her parents?" said Kevin. "What about them? What do they think?" Archie shrugged. "I guess they agree." What do they do? Kevin said. Breathe, eat, clip their toenails. Kevin laughed. You know what I mean. Where do they work? Mrs. Carraway, until a few months ago, was Stargirl's teacher. I understand she also makes costumes for movies. Kevin poked me. The crazy clothes. Her father, Charles, works. He smiles at us. Where else? Micatronics, we said in chorus. Micatronics is the name of the electronic company in that city. It's kind of what made that city. That city didn't exist until this company got there, and it's kind of interesting. You should Google Mica, Arizona, and learn more about it. I said it with wonder, for I had imagined something more exotic. Kevin said, so where is she from? Natural question in a city as young as Mica. Nearly everyone had been born somewhere else. Archie's eyebrows went up. Good question. He took a long pull on the pipe. Some would say Minnesota, but in her case, he let out the smoke, his face disappearing in a gray cloud. A sweet haze veiled the sunset. Cherries roasting in the Maricopas. He whispered, Rara avis. Archie, said Kevin, you're not making a lot of sense. Archie laughed. Do I ever? Kevin jumped up. I wanted to put her in the hot seat, Dorco. Dorco Borlock here doesn't want to. Archie studied me through the smoke. I thought I saw approval, but when he spoke, he merely said, work it out, men. We talked until dark, and we said adios to Senor Saguaro, and on our way out, Archie said more to me than to Kevin, I thought. You'll know her more by your questions than by her answers. Keep looking at her long enough, and one day you might see someone you know. Okay, you have 2 jobs. 1, you should Google Mica, Arizona, and learn more about the city. And 2, I want you to think about this sentence. Keep looking at her long enough, and one day you might see someone you know. What's Archie talking about? Okay, I want you to think about that, do your vocabulary, and your summaries. And yeah, all right, I'll see you back here tomorrow for Chapter 8. All right, bye, guys.